What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Whitman, and we got a full show today. I'm going to try and keep it under an hour, though. I do have a lot going on, but I wanted to get the podcast up. So we're going to talk about Joe Flacco getting traded to the Broncos. We're going to talk about Kareem Hunt back in the NFL with the Browns. We got Antonio Brown we're going to discuss. Kyler Murray commits to football. Some other draft stuff we want to talk about. We're going to fix the AFC South, continue that series, and then we'll get into the mailbag here. A quick reminder, if you guys are shopping for tickets, for concerts, sporting events, go to SeatGeek.com. You'll get the best tickets and the best prices, and use promo code ThatFranchiseGuy. You'll save $20 on your first purchase. So let's get into the show here. I really don't want to keep calling it a show because you can't see anything. It's just my voice. But let's talk some football regardless here, starting with Joe Flacco getting traded to the Denver Broncos. And my initial reaction was, I wouldn't do it myself. John Elway, not exactly the best track record of evaluating these quarterbacks. And there's a whole nother tangent I could go on about former players not necessarily always making the best scouts. But anyway, this is just another kind of uninspiring move here for Denver. Their Super Bowl odds go from 102-1 to 125-1. So from a betting perspective, this doesn't actually mean that Flacco is worse for this team than Case Keenum necessarily, but you do lose the mystery of like what could have happened this offseason. Could you have really upgraded that quarterback situation, maybe a rookie or something? Well, now we know it's just going to be Joe Flacco trying to throw deep, struggling in the short to intermediate game, no mobility at all. And this kind of reminds me of a very poor man's version of what the Minnesota Vikings did. They technically upgraded at quarterback from Case Keenum, but the Vikings did a really bad job of building around their new quarterback. And the nice thing about Case Keenum is he can play off schedule. He can create with his feet. You can get him outside on play action. And yeah, he has his shortcomings, but when you don't have an offensive line and Joe Flacco is your quarterback who can't move, and Joe Flacco's not necessarily very efficient in the short to intermediate passing game, he's not exactly creating windows by throwing guys open. He is the absolute definition of a system quarterback. He just happens to have one of the strongest arms in the NFL, but I don't see Denver having this explosive deep passing game. I don't see it working, honestly. I mean, I actually thought Case Keenum on that contract with 1 year left was a good situation for you to kind of, maybe draft a rookie and have him sit for a year and then take over. It's not that you can't do that with Joe Flacco, but I just don't necessarily see this as an upgrade, John Elway. So Denver's kind of uninspiring now. I had them as kind of a sleeper team next year. I don't know if that's going to stay the same. It's just kind of dry now with Joe Flacco there, and maybe they'll just have him there to compete. I think they can get rid of him at any point. I'm pretty sure Denver incurs all that guaranteed money, so maybe they do still draft a quarterback. But man, I don't love it at all. And you guys know what I think about Kyler Murray. Like, if you could put yourself in a position to go get Kyler Murray instead, I would definitely rather do that. And I thought this team should have gone up for Josh Allen last year too. But now Case Keenum is going to hit the market. Presumably he'll get released. And if I'm the New York Giants, how do you not sign Case Keenum, who worked with Pat Shurmur in Minnesota? Bad offensive line, Eli Manning. Like, who would you rather have starting for the Giants next year, Eli Manning or Case Keenum? I think it's close. So that's my pick for Case Keenum. I think that's very likely. It's a team that needs quarterback help, that has been kind of stubbornly sticking by Eli, but this is a way for them to kind of invest in the position without selling Eli, So that's my spiel on that. I think I'm going to lose you guys if I keep talking about Joe Flacco, Case Keenum, and the New York Giants this whole show. So let's talk about Kareem Hunt signing with the Cleveland Browns. A little more interesting. Now, there's a lot to talk about here. For one, there's this thing where running backs just get absolutely screwed as rookies. So let's just talk about that first. Kareem Hunt was on a rookie deal, a third-round pick, and was set to make like basically league minimum, like $700,000 or $800,000. gets cut by the Chiefs, had basically no guaranteed money left on that thing, gets cut by the Chiefs, but he actually gets picked up for the Browns 1 year, $1 million, which might not sound like a lot for the, sixth, seventh best running back in the NFL, but that's actually more than he was set to make. And I just think that the running backs get absolutely screwed, and I've said this before, but I think these guys should have 3-year deals, not 4-year deals, and maybe a player option or something with the 4th year. But for a position that, honestly, most of these guys aren't these Melvin Gordon, Zeke Elliott, Todd Gurley's that are going to get to that next contract. Most of these guys are, I'm trying to think of a great example here, like an Eddie Lacy, say, who they're going to have 2 or 3 good years, but they're going to get to the point where they're going to be trying to get that next contract. They're going to have some tread on the tires. They're probably going to have some injuries in their history because it's such a violent position, and they're not going to have any leverage to get the money they deserve. Now, I get it, free hand, market economy and stuff. I just feel bad for these running backs in general. Not necessarily feeling bad for Kareem Hunt because of what he did. Let me clarify that. But Kareem Hunt's actually going to make out like a bandit here. He's going to hit free agency sooner and is going to make more in that 3rd year. So he's going to win in this situation. Now, let's just talk about this from a football perspective, because what he did was not okay. There was, I've seen the video. There was really not a reason for him to go over and attack that lady. As opposed to, I'm not always going to be like the annoying, guy that's going to be like, never hit a woman. Obviously, never hit a woman. But this is dangerous to say this. But from what I've heard about, say, Jeffrey Simmons, who's coming out of this class, and we're going to talk about him later because he just tore his ACL. But, 4 years ago, a high school kid, someone attacking his sister, and he goes over and shoves her, maybe it's a little over the top. I think in certain situations, I'm not saying hit women, that's terrible, but there is a definitely a line, and Kareem Hunt crossed that line, and that there's no need for him to do that thing. And I don't think, like some people are saying, I don't think he's a good person, so to speak. And I don't want to get into the politics here. I don't want to have any conversations like this because I'm just here to talk about the football point of view. But that does set up to talk about, was this worth it for the Browns? I think from a football perspective, this was not the best move for the Cleveland Browns. You just drafted one of the best running backs to come out in the last few years in Nick Chubb. And you now sign this guy who's going to come in the locker room. Nick Chubb's going to look at him like, this guy's kind of a scumbag, yet he's taken my job after I just busted my ass to prove myself with this team. That's just a weird message to send in the locker room for a team that's looking to make strides next year. I get that as John Dorsey, you drafted Kareem Hunt. He's kind of your guy. You're going to stand by him. But it's not like they had this big need for Kareem Hunt. They also have Duke Johnson who can catch the ball out of the backfield. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It does not move the needle at all. I think I saw a tweet or a comment that was like, well, now that the Browns got that backfield, they're Super Bowl contenders. It's like, no. You cannot overstate how little the needle moves when you sign Kareem Hunt when you already have Nick Chubb. So I thought it was a pretty dumb move for the Browns. That said, everything I said about the off the field stuff, I think he should be signed by somebody, but not by a team that has a young player like Nick Chubb. That the needle is just not going to move very far bringing in Kareem Hunt. I hope I didn't say something stupid that's going to stir up some controversy, because I really just have no interest in those kind of conversations. Never hit a woman. Just don't. So let's move forward here and talk, stay inside the AFC North and talk about Antonio Brown. So he is going to demand a trade. The Steelers over the last, not just decade, but really over the course of the NFL, have been one of the most stable franchises in all of sports in terms of just culture and team building and winning football games. Now, they've had some weird stuff happen in the last few years. You could point to Mike Tomlin, some of these players, Antonio Brown being an integral part of this. I think you do have some big personalities in that locker room. But this is a classic be careful what you wish for situation, because you have a top 10 quarterback. You have this historic franchise. You have now said, trade me. Well, the Steelers don't owe you anything. They're going to probably get the best they can, and they're certainly not sending you inside this division or inside this conference, frankly, where you're going to come and beat them. So that already narrows your field down to about half. And there's maybe 2-3 trade destinations that are going to make you happy. Like, I think Indianapolis you'd be happy, but are they going to send you to the Colts, who would be a legitimate Super Bowl contender with you? I don't think so. Maybe San Francisco, you would be happy, certainly. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. You've just stirred stuff up. Why do you have to be such a diva, man? It's really, really frustrating, because you realize, Antonio, you're getting paid. You're already one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL. You're in a great situation. You're playing for the AFC every single year. Like, why are you stirring this stuff up, man? It's pretty crazy. Now, if he gets traded to the 49ers, they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders. I've already said multiple times that at 45-1, and they might actually be climbing up now that this Antonio Brown situation is escalating, 45-1 for the 49ers to win the Super Bowl. That's $20 to win 1,000. I've already made that bet. You get Jimmy Garoppolo back, potentially Antonio Brown. I think that's actually a very realistic landing spot, as the 49ers give up their second-round pick, which is essentially a first-round pick. It's like the 34th pick. You give that pick up, and you get now Antonio Brown paired with Jimmy Garoppolo, who I think very highly of. I think if he didn't get injured, would have been in the conversation for MVP, would have been in the playoffs, certainly. And then you add Kyle Shanahan to that mix. You add potentially the best offensive line in the NFL next year. And then a defense that hopefully will get better. Hopefully you draft, maybe Nick Bosa if Kyler Murray goes number 1, like I think he could. And this team could very well have the formula for what like the Eagles did a couple years ago. So other than that, if it's not the 49ers, I've seen Cowboys. No, I don't think that's going to happen. They just traded a first round for Amari Cooper, who they're also going to have to pay. So that's probably not going to happen. Green Bay was on the list. I don't think that's going to happen. This team has done nothing but year after year prove that they don't have the balls to make a big move, and don't seem to understand the power of star players. Other than that, man, I'm not giving up a first round for Antonio Brown. I'm just not. He's 30 years old. He's an incredible player, but he's a big cap hit. So I don't know. I don't know where he's going to end up. Maybe they would send him to like Buffalo, almost like to despite him. Be like, oh, you don't want to play for us? Okay, go have fun in the corner of the northeastern corner of the country. Playing with no offensive line, Josh Allen. So we'll see what plays out. It does look like he's going to get moved, though. We'll see. So Kyler Murray now. Let's transition to a little bit of draft talk here. Officially, posts, I'm in on football. I'm doing this thing, and everyone's freaking out. Like, I thought he was playing baseball. Like, okay, let's start talking about him as a legitimate draft prospect. Well, for those of you that have been following me, go back to mid-January, and I was like, there is no way in hell that this guy is going to play baseball. He's going to be a first-round pick. He is an extremely talented quarterback. He does not want to ride school buses for 2 years and play in front of, like, 300 people in Hobunk, nowhere, USA, for a 10% chance to make it to the big leagues. Like, it's not like he was the 9th pick in baseball. That's not the equivalent of being the 9th pick in the NFL. You got to realize that. Like, the 9th pick in baseball still only has like a 15-20% chance of getting to the bigs, and even then, he's on the Oakland Athletics. Have you guys watched an Oakland A's game? Like, why the hell would he want to go do that when he can say, I'm playing football, and starting in August, well, maybe in September, he's the starting quarterback of whoever, the Denver Broncos, the Arizona Cardinals, whoever it may be, the Miami Dolphins. He is playing in front of the entire world, like instantly, and the money is better. So for everyone that was like all surprised now because he's all in on football, he was never going to play baseball. And there's still people that think he's going to go play baseball. It ain't happening. If you are still in that train of, oh, he could still turn around and go play baseball, like, okay, I don't want to draft him. It's too risky. There is no risk here. He could not care less about the Oakland A's at this point. Unless they were like, we'll give you $15 million like he demanded. The A's are not going to do that. They just aren't. He's not this, elite baseball prospect. His batting average at college wasn't even what you look for. He's just really fast. He's like a poor man's Byron Buxton. As a Twins fan, I understand that. So he's playing football. He's going to be a first-round pick. That's the other thing. People are like, I wouldn't take him because he's going to go play baseball. Yeah, if he goes in the third round where the money's not going to be there, yeah, he's going to go play baseball. I'm telling you guys, he's not going in the first round. He's not. Vegas has the over-under at 9.5. He put this post out here because he's got agents, teams, scouts telling him, you're going to go in the first round. Like, the thing you guys got to realize is the scouts and the agents talk. They do. Like, scouts will tell the agents, we've got a blank round grade on him. He's not going to just come out if he thinks he's going to be a third or fourth round pick. He is going in the first round. I've said that I would take him first overall. He's going to go in the top 10. I would and will bet my money on that. So let's start getting excited about Kyler Murray in the NFL. Let's stop talking about this baseball thing. I've said that I would take him as the Arizona Cardinals, not necessarily because I think he is a better prospect than Josh Rosen, but because I think Josh Rosen as a system quarterback is set up to fail in Arizona, whereas Kyler Murray can kind of do like what Deshaun Watson has done, what we saw from Wentz in his rookie year, what we saw from Josh Allen in Buffalo. Even the same thing can be said about like Darnold and even a little bit of Baker. Like, when you are mobile, if you don't have an offensive line, if you don't have receivers, if your scheme sucks, you can elude pressure, you can create offense, you can at least produce and develop yourself despite surrounding core. That's what I love about Kyler Murray. Josh Rosen is sitting there waiting for receivers, waiting for offensive lines so he can use his skill set, and I don't see that happening. There's no free agents, and the draft isn't that good at those positions. So if I'm Arizona, I trade Josh Rosen to someone that wants him. You can get a first-round pick back, I can promise you that. And then you go forward with Kyler Murray, who can create. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not. Like Cliff Kingsbury just said that Rosen's our guy. I don't put a lot of weight in that personally. These coaches are going to say they're standing by their quarterback until they have someone else that they like better. So they're going to say that now so that Josh Rosen continues to prepare to be the starting quarterback of the Arizona Cardinals come OTAs, come training camp. Of course he's going to say that. Does he believe it? We don't know. We know he likes Kyler Murray. He's got 2 months to sit there and interview Kyler Murray, to watch his tape, to see him throw, to fall in love with Kyler Murray. And if that happens, I don't see any reason why they have to be so attached to Josh Rosen. He was the 10th overall pick. And they have plenty of cap space. They're not ready to win now. They can take that penalty for trading him away. It's not that big a deal when you're talking about finding your quarterback. So I'm not ready to write off Kyler Murray going first overall to the Arizona Cardinals, but definitely not first overall in general. Someone else could totally trade up for him. So let's move on and talk about Jeffrey Simmons now, who just tore his ACL. He's for those who don't know who Jeffrey Simmons is super talented interior defensive lineman for Mississippi State. And I've said before that if this defensive class was a little thinner, right now it's got a lot of really good defensive linemen, both on the edge and the inside. But if this were a different class, Jeffrey Simmons probably a top 10 pick, especially if you get rid of the off-the-field issues. And I kind of already hit on that. But apparently, like 4 years ago, this is just what I've heard. And I think there's a video. I haven't actually watched the video, so I could be totally wrong on this, but this is just my initial reaction to what I heard. Someone was attacking his sister, a woman, and he engaged in contact with that woman. I don't know if he punched her or shoved her or what, but regardless, I do have a little more sympathy for someone if it's your sister getting attacked by another human. So the act itself, I haven't seen the video, so I don't know what he did. If he went over the top, that's not okay. But everything I've heard is 4 years ago, this guy has been nothing but a model citizen. He feels terrible for what he did, and there's no indication that he is going to be anything but a role model moving forward. And then on the field, he's incredible. So I really like Jeffrey Simmons as a prospect. He's uber athletic. He can rush the passer. He's ideal size, like 6'4", 296. So he's very quick. So he has the ability to bull rush you, but also has the ideal quickness for run defense and pass rush. So I really like him as a prospect. Reminds me a lot of Sheldon Richardson, to be honest. I think Richardson also had some off the field questions too. So perfect comparison. But he tears his ACL in training. So that means, let's see, what is it, the 14th of February? About 9 months to recover from that. So in theory, Jeffrey Simmons could be a factor come December and playoffs. ACLs these days are like a high ankle sprain, to be honest. Now, you suffer multiple ACL injuries on the same side. That's not ideal. But at this point, what percentage of NFL players have torn an ACL in their career? It's got to be at least 15, 20%. The injury itself, it doesn't really change my evaluation of Jeffrey Simmons. It's a setback, and it's unfortunate. It definitely lowers his stock a little bit, but the big question is, do you still take this guy in the first round? And yeah, I totally would. If I'm like the Chargers, for example, who need interior line help, this gives you the opportunity to get someone that, frankly, in another circumstance, would be the 7th or 8th pick in the draft. As someone who's been a Packers fan, I understand it's hard to get that talent in the end of the first. It's a big reason I wanted my team to take Jalen Smith or Miles Jack, is because those players, those blue chip defensive players, don't normally fall past, the 15th, 16th pick. And if you get an opportunity to take a chance on a player that more likely than not is going to become that blue chip defender, take him. But then how far do you push him up for that reason? Like Minnesota at 18, which is roughly where he probably would have gone. I think he probably was looking about 10 to 15 for Jeffrey Simmons. But like Minnesota, pick in 17th or 18th? They need interior line help. But, how much do you need that impact right away? How confident are you that you can survive at that position and put yourself in playoff competition until he's ready to come off IR or whatever around December? So it's now a very intriguing storyline here with Jeffrey Simmons becoming one of the most intriguing prospects in this class. I still love him, and I'm not going to fault any team that takes him in the first round after about the 14th, 15th pick, because I think he's just a great player. I think in more worlds than not worlds, that's not saying that right, but more likely than not, he's going to become an impact defensive player. Maybe not this year, but he could still come in the playoffs and be an impact player for you. He does still have to, he has that setback from, he's not going to be there for rookie mini camp. He's not going to be there for, experiencing what it's like to play with NFL talent. He's probably not going to come in and be Aaron Donald in the playoffs, but, he could do what like Ndamukong Suh did in the playoffs, who basically wasn't a factor for the Rams all of the regular season anyway, and then made some plays in the playoffs that really helped them in that Super Bowl run. So I still like Jeffrey Simmons. We can move on. And now we're going to talk about fixing the AFC South. So we've done the North, we've done the East. Now we've got the AFC South that has, over the last couple of years, become a very competitive division. It's been fun to see this division develop from one of the worst in the league, if not the worst, a couple years ago to now, at least up there for the most competitive. But you do really have, I would say, two teams in the Texans and the Colts that could become legitimate Super Bowl contenders next year. And then you have the Jags, who were obviously in the AFC Championship just a year ago. They still have a great defense. They could get back to the playoffs. And then the Titans were also in the playoffs last year, a year ago rather. And they are coming off a season where they had high expectations, but really had the injury bug pretty heavy, especially at the quarterback position. So this is a really intriguing division. We're going to go through team by team and just kind of talk about the moves that I would make throughout the offseason and then where my expectations for those teams roughly would be if they made those moves we're talking about. So let's start in Jacksonville. And I actually thought Joe Flacco was a top candidate for Jacksonville. That's passed. So now, obviously that quarterback position is going to be the talking point here. So it's not going to be Joe Flacco. Is it going to be Nick Foles? I wouldn't want it to be Nick Foles myself. I kind of have a hot take, but I don't think Nick Foles is going to be starting next year like most people think. I think he's quite overrated, honestly. So who is going to be the quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars? So Nick Foles is an option. Is it going to be Teddy Bridgewater? Man, I still would not put all of my chips in on Teddy Bridgewater. I think he's a great dude. He's a good game managing type quarterback. He's honestly a pretty good fit here too. But I mean, in that one game he played with the Saints at the end of the year, he didn't look spectacular. I don't know how mobile he is these days after a really bad knee injury. We talked about ACLs earlier. This was much more than that. He's already a guy that we had been saying for years, and this was a big reason he fell in the draft, is like he's kind of a twig. Like, I don't know how much health he's going to have in the NFL. He doesn't have a great arm. I think he's right on that fringe of like backup and starter. I think I'd rather go Teddy than Nick Foles, but it's close. And I don't think either of those options are going to make this a playoff team next year. Then you look at the draft. Obviously, I think Kyler Murray could come in here and make this team a playoff team next year. But the question is, does the team that thought Blake Bortles was worth the third overall pick see Kyler Murray as a game-changing quarterback? Are they willing to take that risk on a 5'9" quarterback after this team looked at Blake Bortles as the prototype quarterback with the arm talent and the size? We're like, that's our guy. I just, gut feeling, don't think they're going to like Kyler Murray, even though if I were in charge, I'd be moving up to the number one pick and taking Kyler Murray if I'm Jacksonville, because they are that player away from, frankly, being a Super Bowl contender this year. But I'm not the one in charge. I do think Dwayne Haskins is a guy they're going to like. He can throw the ball short very efficiently, West Coast style. He is one of the quickest releases I've ever seen for a college prospect. This team loves their crossing routes. The receivers are set up for catch and run ability. I do think that Dwayne Haskins could come in here and make this a playoff team. I don't know if they're going to win a Super Bowl with Dwayne Haskins. I'm kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on him. So at quarterback, it's going to be tough. Like I said, I would do whatever I could to get Kyler Murray here in Jacksonville. I don't know if they will see it that way, though. And then the other quarterbacks, in this class, I just don't see saving the day here. Maybe you go get Tyrod Taylor. Kind of the same thing with Teddy Bridgewater there. You could bring in Ryan Tannehill. That would probably be better, honestly, than Nick Foles or bringing in Joe Flacco. But I think this team needs a guy like Kyler Murray, or at least the chance of a guy like Kyler Murray to be their Russell Wilson, to carry this team to a Super Bowl. So that's just the quarterback evaluation here. Let's talk about the rest of their offseason. Obviously, the quarterback is a very important part there, but the upcoming free agents, this team is entering kind of a tough window here. They spent essentially all their money on that team that had that great defense last year. Now, they still have most of their pieces intact here. They're going to lose Dante Moncrief, Corey Grant, TJ Yeldon. Let's see, just scrolling through here. They got some lower-level linemen that are going to be leaving. and that's basically it. So in terms of free agency, you're not going to be able to sign too much here, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe you cut like Marcel Darius, but in terms of free agency, this team I think is going to be kind of stagnant. I do think you could benefit with those running backs leaving, with the Leonard Fournette situation. You could benefit from maybe paying like a Tevin Coleman, who would be a really good fit here, because I think they need that running back who can really be a factor in the receiving game, because I don't think this team is going to be the dominant run-heavy team that they want to be. And you do have Leonard Fournette there if you want to run between the tackles. But I do think investing in a good running back like Tevin Coleman could actually pay off for this team, which sounds kind of counterintuitive because you usually say don't pay running backs. That mostly applies to teams that have quarterbacks. If you have a quarterback managing the football, you don't need a running back, you know? If you're the Packers or the Colts or the Patriots, you don't need to invest too much in that running back position. But when your quarterback can't handle the football for you, you want to put the ball in the hands of a playmaker, like we're seeing with Saquon in New York, or what I'm saying they should do here with Tevin Coleman. But outside of that, I mean, there's not really any wide receiver free agents that you'd love here. Maybe Golden Tate could come in and be a good pairing with like a Dwayne Haskins to really have an efficient, horizontal West Coast style offense here that, you know, they don't need to be over-the-top explosive to be a playoff contender here. They can take care of the football, put up, 20 points a game and play good defense and be a very competitive team next year. But you got to have all the right pieces in place. Defensively, they're just kind of loaded. Like I said, you might cut Marcel Darius if you want to make some of those moves on the offense, but they're pretty set on defense. They could use some more help at safety. I don't know if they would sign a high-end guy like a Landon Collins or an Adrian Amos or whatever, but maybe you sign like an Adrian Phillips or a Trey Boston to come in and be a replacer at safety there. They did spend a third-round pick on the guy out of Alabama last year, though, so maybe he comes in and can start there. So free agency is going to be a little quiet. The draft, like I said, I'm focused on quarterback, and then maybe another wide receiver who can be good in the catch and run game. Maybe a running back there early in the second. Josh Jacobs probably going to be gone, but like a Darrell Henderson, could he be there for them? That would be a great fit for them. And then probably later in the draft, I'm going to be spending resources on offensive linemen, maybe a little depth at corner. That's pretty much it. You got some pretty solid depth up front on that D-line. But yeah, corner and wide receiver, skill players and offensive line, it's our needs for this team. So if you let's just say ideal world, this team trades their first round pick and a first round pick next year to get Kyler Murray number 1 overall. That would be my offer, I think, and Arizona probably takes that, to be honest. So you get Kyler Murray in here. I'd cut Marcel Darius. I'd sign, you might not be able to get Golden Tate. Let's say you sign Randall Cobb or Cole Beasley to be a starting slot receiver. You get Marquise Lee back. You had somewhat of a breakout in D.D. Westbrook. So you have some speed there to work on the outsides with Kyler Murray. You sign Tevin Coleman, who can be that elite receiving back. So you are going to be able to create offense because of what Kyler Murray can do with his feet. You're not going to have an elite offense, but then you would still have a good defense. You would have a functional offense as opposed to what they had last year. And this team could be a playoff team. And if Kyler Murray hits the ceiling that I think he can, you would be a Super Bowl contending team this year. But we'll see how it plays out. I have a feeling they're probably just going to butcher the quarterback position. And we'll see what they do with the free agency. They haven't exactly nailed it. Other than, they nailed it a couple of years ago when they put together that amazing defense, but I did not love what they did last year. They spent a ton of money at guard on what's-his-name from Carolina, and he did not really work out for them. So let's move on to the Tennessee Titans here. And the Titans had a very disappointing season. I don't think anyone's going to deny that. But it was a team that really suffered from injuries to the quarterback position, which is a heavy indicator of being able to bounce back. It's a very, very deep roster, and I'm seeing right now they only have like 12 players set to become free agents. Now, Brian Arakpo, Derek Morgan, Quentin Spain, Kenny Vaccaro, not huge impact players, but some of that depth. So this team is going to be in the conversation for the playoffs next year. They're going to have a new offensive coordinator. I'm sorry, I don't know who it is. But LaFleur going to come to Green Bay, and they're going to try to get another offensive coordinator here for Marcus Mariota, who has really failed to progress, but he's still going to be their guy next year. There's no doubt about that. And he's got to stay healthy. But as far as free agency is concerned, you got a little bit of flexibility here because Arakpo and Moore are going to be gone. It's a very deep edge class. Maybe you can get like a Cam Wake to come in here, or Ezekiel Ansah, or Shaquille Barrett, so someone that can go and play 3-4 outside linebacker in this scheme to pair well with Harold Landry, who I think is incredible. You've got a good linebacking core there. The Bama rookie had a good year there. Also, the young guy at UCLA, Brown, he had a really good year as well. And you still got Avery Williamson, so they got some good linebackers. They need more speed at corner. I like Adoree Jackson, but between Malcolm Butler and Logan Ryan, you need more speed in the secondary. You're probably not getting that in free agency. It's probably something you're going to have to address through the draft. Maybe you take a chance on like Trevor Williams or Bryce Callahan, Jason Verrett, maybe. But I think probably just getting a good young player in the draft, maybe like a DeAndre Baker or something like that. If you could get, what's his name, from Washington to fall to you, his name's escaping me right now. Byron Murphy is a corner that I absolutely love in this class. If you could land him in the middle of the first, that would be a total steal for them. You definitely need another speedy corner in there to help out this defense be faster. But I do think this team's going to win with defense, running the ball, and Marcus Mariota staying healthy. So that's got to be your focus. You're going to have to do something with this offensive line. Like, it was much worse this year. A couple of years ago, this was one of the best lines in the NFL, but those guards got a lot older. Quentin Spain's going to be hitting free agency here. So maybe you spend up for like Roger Saffold or Mitch Morse or something. Maybe you try to address that in the draft. Again, everyone is looking for offensive linemen. It's incredibly competitive to sign some of those guys. You're going to have to pay like 2 grades above probably for some of these guys. Like, for example, like Matt Paradise, probably a B grade, maybe a C+ grade player. But you're going to have to pay him like a superstar if you want to get Matt Paradise, who's had a couple good years at center in this league. You're going to have to pay him like one of the best linemen in the NFL. It's just supply and demand, because there's like 14, 15 teams that would say, we need offensive linemen. Like, you just look on NFL Twitter, anyone that's trying to fix their team essentially is saying, spend money on O-line. Well, it's not that simple. There's like 10 guys that I would even want starting, hitting the market in free agency, and there's more teams than that that are looking for those players. So it's going to get really interesting spending money. So I don't know if the Titans are in a position to do that after they kind of spent a lot of money last year. So let's talk about the draft for the Titans. We kind of did already. I think Byron Murphy in the first, if he could fall to you, that would be a home run. But then maybe edge rusher. Do you take a chance on like Brian Burns, who I think is a bit of a project but has a lot of upside? Maybe like Ja'Kai Polite could fall to you. That would be just awesome if you're a Titans fan. I do think that other pass rusher in the first round or a corner would be big for this team. Otherwise, I'd maybe look into trading down for a receiver. There's a big cluster of receivers that are, late first, early second rounders. There's like 8 dudes that I really like. So maybe if you're Tennessee, you think about that. Or a tight end. Delanie Walker is not getting any younger, and he just had a bad injury. So that Mariota likes that tight end position. Maybe you look at like TJ Hawkinson, who is now my number 1 tight end on my board. That dude is just a monster. So maybe you think about that. They definitely need some playmakers on the outside. But as the draft goes on, I'm definitely looking at guards. I'm looking at corners. I'm looking at wide receivers. Pretty much the same needs as the Jags, to be honest. So let's move on. Or I guess we got to talk about my expectations. So if that's your ideal offseason, do some of the things I said there. Say they get Byron Murphy or Ja'Kai Polite to enter that top 10 defense level. Maybe you do bring in a guard, you draft a guard, or you sign Roger Saffold or something, and you're able to keep Marcus Mariota upright. You land, say, Paris Campbell in the second round to get some speed at wide receiver. Well, you could definitely be a playoff team next year. This offense needs to be better. I think this defense will be better. I have less confidence in the offense to be better. But you could certainly win 10 games or so, get in. Probably not win this division, but get in as a wild card, lose in the first round, and try to get some more momentum going into the next year. Hopefully Mariota showed you enough signs that you're comfortable extending him. Worst case scenario is you're prepared to move on from Mariota and kind of blow this thing up. This team could go in either direction because they are kind of lacking star power, and they are dangerously close to kind of falling apart, but they have so much depth that they kind of just persist. But you can take that step up, I think, if you're the Titans this year. So next we got the Houston Texans here. They've got a really messy offseason ahead of them. This team in general is just kind of messy. They have a lot of bad contracts, in my opinion. You've got the benefit of having Deshaun Watson on that rookie deal, though, so they are actually going to have a ton of cap space. They just released Demaryius Thomas. That was not a surprise to anyone. But you just paid DeAndre Hopkins. J.J. Watt's still on his deal. And then you got Jadeveon Clowney's up and Tyrann Mathieu's up. They have plenty of money to bring Jadeveon Clowney back. I think they will. Is he worth the money he's going to get? I don't think so. He's an insanely good run defender, a pretty good pass rusher, but I think a little overrated in that regard. They're probably going to give him like $21 million a year. And I think they have to. They could franchise tag him, which is probably the better situation. So either way, he's going to be a huge cap hit next year. It's just a matter of if you want to pay him that over 4 or 5 years to lock him up, or if you just want to tag him and see what happens next year. And then Tyrann Mathieu, they should be able to bring him back. He had a good year. He was playing on a 1-year, $7 million deal. I thought that was an absolute steal for them. I was surprised the market for him was not higher. I could see Tyrann Mathieu getting another 2-3 year deal. He's only 27 years old. Give him like a 2-year, 3-year, $30 million deal, something like that. So you'd still have like $50 million in cap space after Clowney and Tyrann Mathieu. But this team, and I've said this so many times, is just drilled with holes. They're like a wall in the middle of the Middle Eastern war. Like, they have just holes everywhere. Offensive line is miserable. You have a couple guys on the inside there, but you need 2 tackles, probably another guard. You have no running back. Like, Lamar Miller, I've never been a fan. He's fine. He's fine. You can start him, but he's not going to create anything for you. He had one good run this year. It's like the best play he's had for the Texans, where he finally showed some good speed. But just Lamar Miller, I'd probably cut him, honestly. His contract's too big. I thought that the second they signed him. So you need running back. You need receivers. Like, obviously, DeAndre Hopkins is the best receiver in the NFL, and luckily, Deshaun Watson's going to be able to develop some guys around him. We saw DeAndre Carter have some success. Obviously, he's done a good job developing Will Fuller. Will Fuller can't stay healthy. And even if he is healthy, you still need a good slot receiver. So is that through the draft? Do you bring back DeAndre Carter? You need probably some help at tight end. Like, Jordan Akins is kind of eh. So they don't really have anyone on offense outside of DeAndre Hopkins. Their offensive line is so bad. And then defensively, well, Christian Covington's a free agent here. You're going to need to beef up that D-line a little bit, I think. Like, J.J. Watt's kind of a interior guy, kind of an outside guy. I like the 2 Clemson guys they have. But you could really use another piece on that D-line to play better run defense. And then at linebacker, they're fine. And then the secondary is kind of a mess. Like, Kareem Jackson's like the only guy they had in that secondary, and Tyrann Mathieu. They're going to have to pay them. They don't have any other corners. Jonathan Joseph is not cutting it anymore. He's like 36 years old. So this team has a lot of work to do this offseason. But the tone of my voice here, it's kind of excited because this team has a crazy high upside. Deshaun Watson was no joke this year. He really impressed me. He looks like a potentially elite quarterback down the road. His arm talent, I keep saying this, really impressed me. I didn't think he could throw the ball as hard as he threw it this year. And just his accuracy and field vision was great, especially considering how bad that offensive line was. So you put some better linemen around him, I'd be really excited to see what Watson can do. And then you still got Hopkins, who's not going anywhere. Hopkins was the best non-quarterback in the NFL this year, outside of Aaron Donald. So you got a ton of potential on that offense to be explosive, seriously explosive. I think Bill O'Brien is underrated as an offensive mind. But defensively, you got to just clear this thing up because I see a bunch of bad contracts. I see a situation where you need to just get some stability because this defense does not have any consistency week to week. And I think Texans fans would probably agree with that. You see the weeks where this team is just dominant, but from whether it's a scheme perspective or just having that depth to be consistent week to week, it's just missing something on that defense that they need considering the offense isn't elite yet. But this team's ceiling is absurd because of the superstars that they have on this team. So in the draft, you're just looking at those positions I talked about. Cornerback would be a huge need later in the first round. You could probably use another safety, but you're not taking that in the first. Maybe in the second, you'd take like a Taylor Rapp or a Nasir Adderley. And then D-tackle later. Offensive line early is a huge thing, maybe in the first round. Going to be an intriguing offseason, and it's maybe one of the most important offseasons for any team because they have a lot of players leaving and a lot of holes to fill, but a big, big ceiling. So the last team here, the Indianapolis Colts, are right there with the Texans in terms of interesting offseason because this team was not supposed to be as good as they were. They have just an F-ton of cap space. They have a dominant offensive line. They have an elite quarterback. And they have draft capital. So it's going to be a really intriguing offseason. They do have some holes, though. Defensively, they need help at cornerback. They could really use another edge rusher. I like the kid out of, what was it, Rutgers or Maryland. I was high on him. His name's escaping me, the edge rusher. But he didn't play a ton. Jabal Sheard continues to be really good, but I don't know if he's going to repeat as to be a pretty aged player, to say the least. The interior of that line the last couple of years has been very underrated, but the pieces they had are set to leave, Margus Hunt and Al Woods. So defensively, you really do need to address a lot there. And then offensively, they aren't perfect. They need receivers pretty bad. Like, you got T.Y. Hilton, obviously, but outside of him, it's probably the worst receiving core in the NFL. So you got to address that. And I hesitated there because I thought Eric Ebron only signed a one-year deal, but it looks like he's going to be back. But they definitely need another wide receiver. That's why people think Antonio Brown. You see receivers mocked to them quite often in the first round, which I think makes sense. Now, the difficulty here for the Colts is they have all this cap space, but their needs aren't necessarily where the players in free agency are. The best players in free agency, in my opinion, are at safety, at edge rush, and at linebacker and interior defensive line. This team's needs are cornerback and wide receiver. So, re-signing Dante Moncrief or bringing in Golden Tate probably aren't going to, fix your wide receiver issues. I do think this is a good landing spot for Golden Tate, though. Who could be a real nice complement with Andrew Luck, who really changed his game to be very efficient in that short to intermediate game. A lot easier to do that when you got Golden Tate as opposed to like Ryan Grant and Dontrell Inman. So that would be a huge upgrade, would be Golden Tate. And then I like the idea of them signing like Trey Flowers or D Ford. Just spend up for that number 2 edge rusher. Even Cameron Wake, if you want a veteran guy, or Ezekiel Ansah. Maybe Terrell Suggs hits the market. Something like that, to bring in that other piece on the other edge to really help this defense, to help these corners develop. Maybe you pay up for like Bradley Roby. I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. And the other corners are not the best in this class. By the way, you can really tell what teams value just by looking at where the depth is at free agent. It's the bad groups in free agency are wide receiver, offensive line, and cornerback. What does that tell you? People want to protect their quarterback, they want to give their quarterback weapons, and they want to cover up the other team's quarterbacks. It's the direction this team, or the direction this league's going. And unfortunately for the Colts, they do lack those positions other than offensive line. So they do have a lot of money, but I don't know how much they're going to get involved in free agency. I do think if they could convince the Steelers to give them Antonio Brown, that would be a baller move. But I don't see it happening. So then in the draft, you're looking at corner and wide receiver. Definitely. And maybe an edge rusher. But this team should be pretty easy to fix, honestly, despite everything I just said, because you got the quarterback, you got the offensive line, and you got the coach. Those are 3 critical pieces to rebuild. It just makes whatever you invest in, it makes it even more likely that those are going to work out, that you'll be able to develop players you draft, that you'll be able to plug certain scheme fits in free agency. You can take a lower level guy. You can take an Adam Humphries or a Cole Beasley if you know the scheme is right, and you can get them to play much higher than their pay grade. That's what having that quarterback, coach, offensive line combination allows you to do. And I think that's why you see teams like the Ravens, the Jags, some of these teams that don't have that quarterback struggle to draft wide receiver. They struggle to sign wide receivers and get them to play even at their pay grade. Look at like Dante Moncrief, really struggled in Jacksonville. So the Colts, I think, are going to be fine no matter what they do. But the moves they make and what they're able to pull off is going to be really interesting to see what their ceiling turns into next year. So we're just under the hour mark here. We're going to get into the mailbag here for about 8 minutes, and then we'll be on our way here. Just pulling up my Twitter here. A reminder, you can follow me at TFG_football. So we've got like 16 mailbag questions here. So let's get into it. Most hyped up player in this draft you believe will fall the furthest. This is from Jason Balliot, a longtime listener and follower on Twitter. He also says, with your roster overall coming out soon, what other changes are you making to non-quarterbacks? I'd love to answer that question. So the most hyped up player in this draft that I think will fall the furthest, that's kind of an interesting question. So the guy that people love that is going to be kind of that surprise fall, like last year was Derwin James, I would say. I'm going to go actually with Josh Allen. Bit of a surprise there. Most people think, he's a lock for top 4. And every year we see a couple players like Jonathan Allen a couple years ago, or we had Malik Hooker fell to the Colts. We had last year Derwin James. Certain players just fall because some teams don't have that hype that you see on draft Twitter. Some teams just have priority on other positions. It just happens. So it's going to happen this year too. I think Josh Allen is a great candidate for that. I think he's an incredible player in a good 3-4 scheme that's going to have a versatile zone blitz packages where he can drop back and rush off the edge. He's going to be potentially an elite player at the next level. But the thing is, most of the teams, not just in the top 10, but in this league, are 4-3 teams. I don't see Josh Allen as good as Ja'Kai Polite, as good as Zach Allen, frankly, as that defensive end, primarily a pass rusher. I like Josh Allen's movement skills and his ability to just create mismatch issues in a 3-4 scheme. As a 4-3 end, he could be good. Could be really good, but I actually like the tape from Zach Allen, Ja'Kai Polite at that position a lot better. Even Rashawn Gary, I think, might be better in a 4-3 scheme than Josh Allen. So just because of scheme fit, I think we could see Josh Allen fall quite a bit into the early teens. And then with your overhaul coming out, what other changes am I making to non-quarterbacks? I am so excited for this Madden 19 roster overhaul. I can't plug it enough. It's going to really improve a lot of the gameplay issues. I have a video about it. So the quarterback overhaul, for those that don't know, lower throw power. I always found it weird how like the lowest throw power on the vanilla roster is like 83, 84. Well, I lowered it down to like 73, 74 for Case Keenum, and he could still throw the ball 50 yards. So it's going to have that. The accuracy is much higher for short, but much lower for deep accuracy, and it plays pretty well. But other than that, we are nuking jumping for linebackers, and even some safeties I think will lower so that you don't get these crazy animations. It's going to be capped at 70 jumping for middle linebackers, so the really athletic ones will be up at like 69, 70, but the Blake Martinez's of the world are going to be into the 50s for jumping, so you'll be able to throw over the middle much more. Really excited for that. Spin move is going to be new here. We are lowering the crap out of spin move because I'm tired of how overpowered spin move is in Madden 19. And then all the other stuff we do is still going to apply here too. Lower impact blocking ratings for linebackers. Undersized linebackers are going to have a harder time in the trenches. Lower block shedding. The accurate strength overhaul. Everything I've said is still going to apply here. If you aren't familiar with my roster and you happen to be listening to this, do check out those videos. So we spent a lot of time on that question, but good questions, Jason. We'll probably go a little over an hour here. Should the Cowboys re-sign Dak? This offseason? No, I wouldn't. Unless he holds out. But I think you just try to convince him to play this year on that $900K deal. The Cowboys have a legitimate chance, if you're not paying Dak $20 million or whatever, to put a Super Bowl team together. I actually think that. I think you're going to get Frederick back at center. The offensive line should be much better, so the run game will be better. You're going to have another year of Dak and Amari Cooper, a full offseason. Like, this offense should be, it has potential to be better than it was a couple years ago when it was one of the best in the league. And then this defense is legit now, man. But if you got to start paying Dak $25 million this year, it's going to be hard to keep, Byron Jones around, DeMarcus Lawrence, some of these big pieces. Amari Cooper is a free agent. Now, if they have that big year and they're able to make it work with the cap in a year, yeah, I'd pay the man. He's a good quarterback, and it's hard just to get to that level. I mean, he definitely falls into the game manager type. He's got his limitations. But at some point, when you have a talented team, it's like the Andy Dalton thing. You got to at least try it. I wouldn't give him a 5-year deal. I'd give him a 3-year deal, just like Jimmy Garoppolo got. And, it gives you flexibility to eventually move on from him if the team falls apart. But when you have this window with this talent, with this offensive line, with this defense, with these young linebackers, with Amari Cooper, Ezekiel Elliott in his prime, I do think, yes, you pay Dak. Don't stir the pot and start over with some random rookie. But if he's demanding like a 6-year, $200 million deal, no, I can't do that. I just can't. I'll take my chances that a rookie quarterback on a 5-year deal getting paid pocket change can come in and do that, like a Will Grier or whoever you like late in the first. Maybe it's even like Daniel Jones if he falls, or Drew Lock. Is Haskins more of a runner than a thrower? That's a diss on Stephen A. Smith, who apparently has never watched a game of football in his life. No, Haskins is a pocket passer. Thoughts on A.J. Brown, receiver out of Ole Miss? I just have a bias against Ole Miss players, especially those high-profile 5-star recruits. That program is infamous for just kind of feeding these guys with the silver spoon, and then the players coming out like Robert Nkemdiche, even Laramie Tunsil. He's been a fine player, but he hasn't really developed. And then Laquan Treadwell being the other obvious one. All these A.J. Brown types, these 5-star prospects that probably only went to Ole Miss because they got free cars for their parents or a new house, or they got taken to the strip club every night, that kind of thing. Those aren't the kind of players that I want in the NFL. I want blue-collar players. So if you think AJ, I can't speak on AJ Brown himself. I can only speak on the track record of players at that program. AJ Brown, the receiver, is a freak, man. Like, he could come out and run in the 4.5s, which at his size, like 6'4", 230, he's almost like a tight end. You know, he could be a damn good receiver, and he could be a steal if you get a good worker. I just don't know if that's what you're getting. And the same thing can be said about DK Metcalf, even to another level, because DK Metcalf, I don't know if you guys saw those pictures of him. My comparison for him was already Josh Gordon before that picture. But, yeah, that guy could be Josh Gordon, almost quite literally. Like, he could have a hard time staying on the field for whatever reason, but his upside is just ridiculous. A bold offseason prediction for every team, that would be a whole nother video. I can't do that here on the podcast. Could I see Bell to the Texans? No. They got too many holes to spend, you know, a fifth of their cap space on a running back. I think the Texans are a team that you gotta, even if you're overpaying, you have got to spend money on offensive linemen. You just have to. This one's another Cowboys questions. Do I think that they still have a good shot at the playoffs next year since Frederick's coming back? I know they stayed really healthy and won lots of one-score games, but that's a pretty big addition. Yeah, I think I just covered that. I think they could be really good next year. Which teams need one of the Steelers' malcontents, AB and Bell, the most to make a Super Bowl run? How much should they be willing to give up to get them? Well, I don't think Bell is going to be a Super Bowl piece for anyone. I see Bell as someone that could go to like Buffalo or New York, maybe like Tampa, but probably not. Like a team that has a bunch of cap space, but probably isn't, you know, going to win a Super Bowl. Most of these Super Bowl teams are smart. They're not going to pay a running back $14 million. But that's not to say Bell can't help a team get to that level. Like the Jets, I think if you get Bell, you're not trying to win a Super Bowl this year if you're the Jets. Well, you're trying, but you know deep down you're not going to. Bell's a guy that can come in and help develop Darnold and help this team get to the next level, and then eventually it goes on his way. Antonio Brown's a different piece here because receiver's a lot more important. I look at the 49ers, like we talked about earlier, getting Antonio Brown being that huge step up for that offense with that offensive line, with Jimmy Garoppolo, with Kyle Shanahan. That's the move that I think makes the 49ers even more so a Super Bowl contender, even though I already do think that they are. And then the Colts, too, if they could get Brown. But I don't see Pittsburgh sending him inside the conference to another Super Bowl contender. Who are top teams to trade up candidates in this upcoming draft? I think about teams that want to go get a quarterback, obviously. So I look at Miami. But if I'm Miami, I'm probably just going to stay put and blow this thing up. Cincinnati, if Zach Taylor liked, maybe he wants to keep Dwayne Haskins in Ohio, or he really likes Kyler Murray, Cincinnati could do it. Denver still could. Seriously, Denver still could go get that quarterback. We saw it last year with Cleveland. They gave up a mid-round pick for Tyrod Taylor. Pretty much the same thing they're doing with Joe Flacco, but they still took the quarterback. Now, Cleveland had the first overall pick, and Baker Mayfield was, in their eyes, elite level prospect. They could have had Darnold too. That's not the same in this class. Who's more likely to land in DC, Foles or Tannehill? Tannehill. I think he's more consistent with what Gruden likes in a quarterback there with the mobility. Tannehill's basically a poor man's Alex Smith. Also, I just don't think Nick Foles is going to start next year anywhere. Where do I think Nick Foles will land is the next question. It'll be somewhere where... Here's what I think is going to happen. I think the market for Nick Foles is going to be surprisingly slow. I don't think he's going to sign until, let's see, the free agency starts March 14th, actually a month from today. I think he could survive until April, maybe even after the draft, and then he signs somewhere where he's actually got to compete for a first round pick, for a starting job. So is that Miami? Is that Cincinnati? I don't know where else he would have a competition. Probably not Denver now. New York maybe would let him compete with Eli, but probably not. Washington, it could be a fit, but those first two teams I said, Cincinnati and Miami, could be fits for him where they're like, you're not going to start, but you can compete. He'd probably start for Miami next year. Jacksonville's another team you could say the same thing for. What team benefits the most from playing a weaker schedule next year? I think Jacksonville will be better. Which team will be hurt the most? Baltimore comes to mind. Yeah, I mean, any team that kind of surprised is going to be a candidate for the weaker schedule, and any team that really disappointed. So I would definitely think like Green Bay is definitely going to benefit from finishing. Did they finish dead last? No, they finished third. So they're going to play the third place team in all the divisions that they don't play the full division of. So instead of playing, for example, I don't know if this is exactly what it's going to be, but if you finish third, instead of playing the Rams, you're playing the 49ers, which, in that case, the 49ers are another team that's going to benefit from, being the fourth place in their division. So Packers, 49ers would be two candidates for that. Jacksonville most certainly will benefit from it because they went the complete other way. They had to play the best teams this year. And then who's going to get hurt the most? It goes the other way. The teams that, like you said in this question, surprised. Baltimore, Chicago, who else surprised? Maybe Houston. They're going to feel it when they got to play the top teams. So let's move on. Do you think Julian Edelman is a Hall of Famer? No, I don't feel the need to put him in the Hall of Fame. There's a lot of players that are better players than Julian Edelman, and his playoff, resume is incredible, and he steps it up when it's needed. But at some point, you need to just be better than other players to go into the Hall of Fame. For me, at least, if I had a vote, I would be more focused on, were teams scared of you? Were teams game planning against you? Were you doing things that other players couldn't do? That's more of what I think about as a Hall of Fame player. It's a team sport, and he's played on the best team in NFL history for 15 years. He's a great player, don't get me wrong, and he is a borderline Hall of Famer. But I'm not going to put him in over, I don't know, who would even be a comparison? Like Andre Johnson? Is he going to be in the same conversation for a guy that didn't really have the accomplishments but was an incredible player? I don't know if Andre Johnson's a first ballot Hall of Famer, but I would put him in over Julian Edelman for sure. Or like a Hines Ward, I think was just more accomplished other than the rings. Do I still think Kyler Murray would go number one after Kingsbury said Rosen is their guy? I kind of answered that already. And then our boy Lions fan has a question about Detroit. But didn't we already talk about Detroit on the last podcast? This is, what do I think the Lions do this offseason, and don't be biased. Well, we'll get to the rebuilding the NFC North in a couple podcasts here. So I'm going to skip that. Sorry, Lions. So that is the podcast. I still haven't gotten this thing up on other podcast services. I'm sorry about that, guys. It's up on Spotify. It's up here on YouTube. We're working on it. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like button. Seriously, it goes so much further than you understand just with the algorithm and the way it works. So it really helps me out if you hit that like button. So cheers, guys. Thanks for listening. Have a good weekend, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.